Just imagine for a second. You wake up one ordinary morning, turn on the TV to the news, and you hear the anchor saying with that serious voice, "A Houston mother drowned her 5 children in the family bathtub." Your first thought, just like mine and millions of other people's, was, what kind of monster could do that? What kind of coldness, what level of evil is necessary for a mother to look into her own children's eyes and take their lives, one by one? But hold on, because this story I'm going to tell you today will turn everything you think you know about good and evil, about sanity and madness, about responsibility and forgiveness, completely upside down. Andrea Yates wasn't a monster. She was a woman who, for 2 years, screamed for help in every way imaginable, while her mind shattered in slow motion, and no one, absolutely no one, was able to hear her desperation. On June 20th, 2001, on a morning that began like any other in Clear Lake, Texas, the unthinkable happened. Noah, age 7, John, age 5, Paul, age 4, Luke, age 2, and Mary, the baby, just 6 months old. All of them dead, by their own mother's hands. But here's the part that will leave a lump in your throat. When Andrea called 911, her voice was calm. She didn't try to run, didn't make up excuses, didn't cry. She just said, "I need you to come over here." What happened in that house wasn't an ordinary crime. It was the final act of a tragedy that had been unfolding for years, right under our noses, in a society that prefers to pretend that mental illness doesn't exist, that perfect mothers don't have breakdowns, and that faith solves everything. Look, before we continue diving into this story that will stir you to your core, I want to ask for a little something. Go ahead and check if you're still subscribed to the channel. Sometimes YouTube kind of unsubscribes people without warning, and I don't want you to miss any of the cases I research here. And if you want to support me in this work of bringing these stories with the depth they deserve, consider becoming a member of the channel. Besides helping to keep this project on the air, you get access to exclusive content and join a community that truly cares about these human narratives. And there's one more thing I always like to know. Leave a comment telling me the city you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I want to get to know you better, to know where this connection of ours comes from, through these stories that make us reflect on what it means to be human. So go on, comment your city, your time, and how you found your way here today. If you had met Andrea Yates before June of 2001, you would probably have thought, "This is exactly the kind of woman I'd want my children to have as a mother." I'm not exaggerating, not at all. Andrea was one of those people who impress you at first glance. Valedictorian of her high school class. Not second, not third, first. Captain of the swim team. A registered nurse. A woman who seemed to have been born to take care of others. When she married Rusty Yates in 1993, everyone saw a perfect couple. He, a NASA engineer, she, a dedicated nurse. 2 young Christians, full of life, with plans to build a beautiful, blessed family. And for the first few years, that's exactly what happened. Noah was born in 1994, a beautiful, smart, affectionate little boy. John came next in 1995. Paul arrived in 1997. 3 healthy boys, a mother who looked like she'd stepped out of a margarine commercial, a hardworking father. But then, my friend, that's where things start to get strange. Because behind this picture-perfect family image, there was a dynamic that today, looking from the outside, you can see was far from healthy. Rusty had embraced a very radical version of Christianity, the kind that preaches that the wife must be submissive to her husband in everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Andrea stopped working as a nurse because her husband believed a mother's place is in the home. She wasn't allowed to use contraceptives because that went against God's will. And the most astonishing part, in all the years they were married, Rusty had never, repeat with me, never changed a single diaper of any of his children. Picture the scene. An intelligent, educated woman used to handling medical emergencies, suddenly confined to her home with 3 small children, without help, without rest, without even the right to decide whether or not she wants to have more children. Andrea became responsible for 100% of the childcare, waking up in the middle of the night, changing diapers, giving bottles, making food, playing, educating, disciplining, giving baths, putting them to sleep, and the next day, starting it all over from scratch. But society doesn't question these things, does it? A good mother endures it all in silence, with a smile on her face. It's maternal instinct, they say. Mothers don't get sick, they repeat. Why did you have kids if you weren't ready? They whisper. Andrea swallowed all of it, forced to smile, and kept trying to be the perfect mother everyone expected her to be. And here comes a detail that makes my hair stand on end every time I think about it. Andrea's family had a heavy history of mental illness. 2 of her 4 siblings had been diagnosed with depression. A third had bipolar disorder. The genetics were right there, screaming a warning that no one wanted to hear. It was as if there was an emotional time bomb hidden in her DNA, just waiting for the right stress to detonate. In 1999, Luke, the 4th son, was born, and that's when the first crack started to appear in the perfect family's facade. Andrea, who had always handled everything, began to show signs that she wasn't okay. She became quieter, more introspective. Sometimes she would stare into the void for long periods. Other times she looked as if she were carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Neighbors would comment, "Andrea's been acting a bit strange lately." Her friends from church would whisper, "Do you think she's not happy with the 4th baby?" But no one, absolutely no one, imagined that what was happening there was the beginning of one of the most severe psychotic breaks you will ever hear about in your life, because the human mind is a fascinating and terrifying thing at the same time. It can lead us to the greatest achievements, the most beautiful creations, the moments of purest joy. But when it breaks, when it shatters from the inside, it can take us to places that not even our worst nightmares could ever imagine. Andrea was about to find that out in the worst way possible, and the most tragic part is that there were signs everywhere, cries for help being sent out in every form. But our society had created such a rigid image of what a good mother should be that no one could see there was a woman drowning in broad daylight. The 4th child brought with him not just joy, but also the final straw that was needed for Andrea's emotional dam to begin to crack. And when a mind already fragile from genetics, stress, and social isolation begins to crack, my friend, the pieces that are left can cut anyone. After Luke was born in 1999, something changed in Andrea in a way that no one in the family could quite understand. You know those moments when you look at someone and think, "Something's different, but I can't put my finger on it." It was exactly like that. The woman who had always been a hurricane of energy, organizing the house, taking care of the children, keeping everything running like a Swiss watch, suddenly began to move as if she were underwater. She would stand in the middle of the living room, staring at nothing, for minutes on end. When Rusty would ask, "What is it, Andrea?" she would answer with a "nothing, everything's fine," that didn't even convince herself. The children, with that sensitivity that only children possess, started to notice that Mommy was different. Noah, the eldest, would sometimes tug on the hem of her skirt and ask, "Mommy, are you sad?" What no one knew, not even she could understand it at the time, was that Andrea's mind was beginning to fragment in a silent and terrifying way. Postpartum depression had hit with full force, but it wasn't just that. It was something much deeper, much more dangerous. The first signs of a psychosis that was growing like an invisible cancer inside her thoughts. In June of 1999, the first episode that should have set off every possible red flag occurred. Andrea took all the antidepressant pills she had in the house at once. A deliberate overdose. When Rusty came home and found her unconscious, with the empty bottles beside her, he finally understood that the situation was far more serious than he had imagined. But here is one of the most frustrating parts of this whole story. Even after a suicide attempt, even after a psychiatric hospitalization, even after every possible alarm was blaring at the same time, the family continued to treat it as if it were just a difficult phase that would soon pass. Andrea was hospitalized, received medication, went through therapy sessions. The doctors explained to the family that she was suffering from severe postpartum depression combined with psychotic episodes. They were very clear. This is a serious condition that requires constant monitoring and continuous medication. But when she was discharged, her routine went back to being exactly the same as before. 4 small children, no outside help, no change in the family dynamic. 5 weeks after the first attempt, Andrea tried to kill herself again. This time, she took a knife from the kitchen and tried to slit her own throat. Just imagine the desperation. The emotional pain a person must be feeling to reach that point. She didn't want to die on a whim. She wasn't trying to get attention. She wanted the pain to stop. She wanted the voices in her head to stop. She wanted the internal suffering that was consuming her from the inside to finally have an end. Again hospitalization, again medication, again therapy, and again the doctors hammering on the same point. This woman needs constant care, she needs a support network, she needs to drastically reduce the level of stress in her life. But then comes the part that makes me the most angry in this whole story. The psychiatrist who is treating Andrea, Dr. Eileen Starbranch, not only diagnosed her with postpartum psychosis, but gave a very clear and direct instruction to the couple. You must not have any more children. She was categorical. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a medical directive based on Andrea's clinical condition. And do you know what happened? The couple completely ignored the medical advice. Because in their minds, controlled by that radical version of Christianity they had embraced, having children was a blessing from God, and using any kind of birth control would be going against the divine will. In November of 2000, Mary was born, the 5th child. The doctor had warned them. The signs were all there. The time bomb was ticking louder and louder, but no one wanted to listen. In the months following Mary's birth, Andrea began to exhibit behaviors that today, looking back, were desperate screams for help. She stopped speaking almost completely. She would sit for hours in the same spot, her gaze lost. Sometimes the neighbors would see her at the window in the middle of the night, just staring at the street, as if she were waiting for something that would never arrive. Rusty noticed these things, of course, but he interpreted them in a completely mistaken way. To him, his wife was going through a phase of spiritual introspection. He thought she was connecting more deeply with God. It never once crossed his mind that his wife was plunging into a psychosis so deep that she would soon lose all contact with reality. And here is the point that breaks my heart. Throughout this entire period, Andrea continued to fulfill all her duties as a mother. She got up in the middle of the night when Mary cried. She prepared breakfast for the boys. She changed diapers, gave baths, read stories before bed. She was literally falling apart inside, fighting demons that only she could see. But still, even so, she tried to protect her children from the darkness that was taking over her. But the reality is that you can't fight a severe psychosis with willpower alone. It's like trying to hold back an avalanche with your bare hands. No matter how much you exert yourself, no matter how hard you try, there are forces within the human mind that are more powerful than any individual determination, and the avalanche was coming. The delusions were getting more intense, more constant, more convincing. Soon, Andrea would begin to hear voices that none of us can imagine. Voices that would convince her that the only way to save her children was to destroy them. If you've never been through a psychotic episode, it's going to be hard to understand what I'm about to tell you now. But I need you to try, because it's crucial to comprehending what happened on that June morning. Psychosis isn't like in the movies, where the person talks to themselves and acts in an obviously crazy way. In real life, especially at the beginning, it's much more subtle, much more convincing, and much more dangerous. Andrea's mind had become a battlefield where reality and delusions fought for control. And little by little, the delusions were winning the war. She began to believe that Satan was literally inside her. It wasn't a metaphor, not a figure of speech. In her head, there was a malevolent presence controlling her thoughts, whispering horrible things, showing her terrifying visions. She saw television cameras hidden throughout the house, monitoring her every move, every decision she made as a mother. She believed there was a show on TV where hosts analyzed her maternal performance and gave her grades. Today, Andrea forgot to brush Noah's teeth, a score of 6. Andrea took too long to change Mary's diaper, a score of 4. In her head, the entire world was watching and judging every second of her life. But the worst of all were the television commercials. She was absolutely certain that the ads were speaking directly to her, sending coded messages. A breakfast cereal commercial would transform into a critique of the quality of the breakfast she prepared for her children. A diaper ad would become an accusation of negligence. The TV, which should have been an escape, a moment of distraction, had become another source of torment. And then the delusions about the children began. This is the point where the story becomes even darker, where her psychosis took a turn that will make your hair stand on end. Andrea started to believe that her children were developing incorrectly because of her. In her distorted view, she was being such an inadequate mother, that she was ruining the children irreversibly. Luke, that sweet and innocent 2-year-old boy, in his mother's delusional mind, was going to become a mute homosexual. Prostitute. John, 5 years old, who loved to play superhero, she was certain would turn into a serial killer. The children that anyone would see as normal, healthy and happy in her distorted perception were destined for a life of sin and suffering because of the mistakes she was making as a mother. But here comes the most terrifying part of this whole tragedy, the psychotic logic that began to form in her head. In a sane mind, if you're worried about your children's future, you seek help, you talk to psychologists, you change your educational strategy. In a psychotic mind, the solutions follow a completely different, completely distorted logic. Andrea came to the conclusion that if the children continued to live, they would grow up and commit terrible sins. They would turn away from God. They would suffer eternally in hell. But if they died now while they were still innocent, they would go to heaven. This was her twisted logic, born from the depths of her illness. She believed she was saving them, not harming them. She believed she was doing God's will. This is the horror of psychosis. It makes the unthinkable seem like the only logical and righteous path. She was not acting out of malice, but out of a profound, terrifying delusion. She was a victim of her own mind, and tragically, so were her children. This is why understanding mental illness, especially severe forms like psychosis, is so crucial. It's not about good or evil, but about a mind that has lost its way, leading to unimaginable consequences. And the most heartbreaking part is that there were so many missed opportunities to help her, to prevent this tragedy. The system failed Andrea, and in doing so, it failed her children. This story is a stark reminder of the importance of recognizing the signs of mental illness, providing adequate support, and listening to medical professionals. It's a call to compassion, to understanding that sometimes the greatest monsters are not born of evil, but of illness and neglect. And it's a plea to break the stigma surrounding mental health so that no one else has to suffer in silence, and no other family has to endure such an unimaginable loss.